Hello there. I'm going to ask the one question that the politicians and press would deem too dangerous to ask. Have you ever wondered the real reason why this current social unrest is being heaped on the shoulders of a long-defunct organisation, the EDL? The EDL no longer exists. Even its founder, a certain Mr. T, says so. But that three-letter abbreviation still lives on in the heads of our politicians, the intelligence agencies, the police and the press. If they have to keep dragging defunct organisations out of dusty history books, then what's really going on? Could it be because there is no actual cohesive and organised far-right threat? Could it be that the establishment has no far-right organisation worthy of all the attention being heaped on the concept of a massive threat from the far right? And now we hear from research conducted by The Telegraph that 7 in 10 of those appearing in court because of recent violent disorder live less than 5 miles from the scene of the incident. So there has been no mass bussing in of far-right perpetrators of mayhem, has there? No nationwide organisation. Looks more like local hotheads to me. As you will know, I've attended a few of these rallies and protests, and yes, I've seen some rather suspect individuals, but they have been far, far outnumbered by real concerned but peaceful citizens. You've seen and heard me talking to them. But if there is a shadowy far-right organisation, why, after all these years of intensive study of this massive far-right threat, can the establishment only trot out the usual EDL excuses? If there is this huge threat, then name it and go after it. If there is such a huge danger from this far-right movement, then it must have a substantial funding chain that the authorities can shut down. And here's a clue to the answer to all of this. Remember Michael Gove when he was a minister? He gave a speech in Parliament on defining extremism, didn't he? Yes, where he was at great pains to insert as much far-right into it as possible before going on to downplay the activities of a certain hardcore demographic. Well, in that speech, he named a couple of real far-right groups that just about no one had ever heard of before, and he did not mention the EDL. I won't mention those groups he did name as I don't wish to advertise them. But Gove was speaking with the benefit of bang up-to-date information from the intelligence services, and the EDL did not feature. So why does it feature today? Now, there is an element of the far right in the UK, just as it exists in some form or other in all countries across the planet. But as I've said before, maybe two-tier Kia has stupidly become its best recruiting sergeant. Now just think about the police and court interrogations of those arrested for this recent outbreak of violent behaviour. If any of them had been members of a renewed EDL, it would be trumpeted from the rooftops, wouldn't it? The press would be all over it. Further, the names of the far-right groups they belong to would now be public knowledge, and legislation to proscribe them would be starting its way through Parliament. Contrast this to the breaking, but buried, news that pro-Palestine activists used a vehicle to smash their way into Bristol-based defence company, with the BBC reporting, employees and police officers who intervened were assaulted, Avon and Somerset Constabulary said, and 6 people were arrested. Sledgehammers, axes, whips and other homemade weapons were seized, police added. And the BBC went on to say, video shared to social media by campaign group Palestine Action showed people using tools to cut into the warehouse, damaging equipment inside the building and spraying red paint on the premises. Now there's a link the establishment can follow up on with a view to stamping out real organised violence. And how about this one?
Why was there such a low-key, should we say, police presence? Because, I mean, clearly your officers were there, but they were not visible, and yet there were an awful lot of people out and an awful lot of people who were armed with various weapons.
So we have really strong business and community relations, and because we were aware through intelligence that there was a potential protest through that misinformation yesterday, we had the opportunity to meet with community leaders, with business leaders prior to that event to kind of understand the style of policing that we needed to deliver during the course of that operation. So we knew that there was going to be a large amount of people out on that counter-protest. We knew who the vast majority of those people were. We'd had conversations in terms of what that was likely to look like. And so our policing response was commensurate to that intelligence and the information that we'd held with our partners and communities prior to that event taking place.
Even given there were so many of them clearly armed, I mean, would you do the same if it was an EDL type situation?
So we've policed in response to the intelligence that we received at that moment in time. What I would say is that the vast majority of people that attended that protest yesterday did so law-abidingly, and they did it with the right intentions. There were just a small minority of people that attended there and were intent on causing either criminality, disorder or fear within our communities. What we saw was a response from our communities where they were trying to kind of make sure that that was policed within themselves as well, and trying to deter people from taking part in that disorder. And as a result, we've been able to go on, gather that evidence, gather that information. We have made arrests. Well, we've made an arrest this afternoon. We continue to try and make arrests in terms of those people that were involved in those disorders yesterday.
Community and business leaders self-policing. Did I hear that right? And we're told there's no two-tier policing? Even when the government don't call out the actions of a certain demographic? So police intelligence seems no better when they're dealing with the counter-protests, does it? Or is there something more worrying behind that particular lack of preparation? Did the police feel out of its depth, maybe? All while it's becoming more apparent that the MDL might come to pose a big threat, to the point some people are already saying it should be renamed an attack league, not a defence league. Not that I would want to comment on that. Now, there is a lot of talk about certain activities taking place across about 30 localities later on today. All based, as far as I can see, from a single list magicked up from somewhere. However, the first time I clocked this list, it had all the hallmarks of a set-up job to me. So I decided straight away to steer clear of all of them. I'll let you make your own minds up about them, but bear in mind a certain Mr. T has warned on X that most of those protests are fake, as well as being one of the few people who has consistently called for non-violent protest. Anyway, my original question stands. Why do the press and politicians keep on trotting out this EDL mantra when there is no longer such a body? If it did still exist as a threat, Michael Gove would have mentioned it in his extremism speech just a few months ago. And it's also strange that the names of Nigel Farage and a certain Mr. T also keep featuring in this, when there's absolutely no proof of any such connection. In fact, those accusations have led to Farage being forced to beef up his security. Now, if there were proof they were involved, their collars would already have been felt. We all know that. Now, if you did have a chance to ask the police the names of the large far-right organisations that pose such a threat to the nation, they would probably trot out something about operational intelligence that we can't talk about. Whereas in reality, the press would right now be reporting on massive and robust armed police raids across the country to round up the terrorists, wouldn't we? So why aren't journalists queuing up to ask this question? It would be quite a scoop for them, wouldn't it? Or could it be possible that there is no functioning far-right group?